I would rather you, as a first-time founder, exit once, even though not at a crazy $1 billion exit. It could be $1 million, it could be a $5 million, or if you're lucky, $20 million exit. That's really very good. If you can exit, or maybe a few $100,000 exit, doesn't matter. Exit it once, so as to tell people and to tell yourself that you have gone through the whole thing from start to finish, one round. Because you are an entrepreneur, it will not be your last problem to solve. You will find the next problem and you will need investment, right? So if you have exited, you will have cash. So I always say, cash in hand is cash indeed.
Welcome to the iSearch podcast. Today we have Eric Lam on the show. So Eric started his business at the age of 27 years old and grew its revenue by more than 20x year on year within 3 years of starting the business, and he has also raised more than 20 million SGD in funding. So today I'll be discussing with Eric on the concept of the fast founder, how you can start, scale and exit in 36 months without large funding. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Alright, so let's begin with the most interesting questions. So 90% of startups fail. So what do you think is like the main reason, and so how can entrepreneurs avoid this?
Okay, first, before I answer that question, I need to qualify that as an entrepreneur, some people will say that, well, I exited, I started companies and so on. But I've also had my own share of failures. So when I wrote this book called The Fast Founder, I actually reflected in a lot of areas which I failed. So when we talk about why do we say that 90% of startups or 90% of entrepreneurs always fail, right? Very often, the way I looked at it is a lot to do with the paradigm and the mindset of the entrepreneur. Sometimes, because entrepreneurs being who we are creatures of passion. We are highly passionate about our idea. In other words, we start a business because we think we want to do something. But we forget that what we want to do may not be what people want to buy. So we come out, we have this great grandeur idea, we have this great vision, we want to change the world in this way and that way, and we think that we can provide this particular solution and so on. Then we launch into the market, only to find out that no one cares about what we have. And then we get dejected. Of course, entrepreneurs don't normally give up, so we try again, we try again. But because we fail to see what the customers want, we don't arrive at what many people call a product market fit. So when we don't arrive at the product market fit, what we do is that maybe along the way we raise some money from angel investors, from some venture capitalists and so on. Then we burn the money to the ground already. Then we ask ourselves, what do we do next? And then we get all dejected. That's how we fail, because our investors no longer have confidence in what we do. And so recently, when I was involved in one of those pitching sessions as a shark or a judge, we asked the entrepreneur, what is it that makes your product or your offering so special? And the entrepreneur said, oh, because I'm determined and I'm more passionate than anyone else. That's not a good answer, because every single entrepreneur is always determined, always passionate, always have an idea to want to change the world. But the problem is, we think that is what the world wants, but only to find out that's something no one wants. And that's the reason why a lot of times we fail. And the other reason why entrepreneurs sometimes would fail is that because we so believe in our idea so much that we stop listening and stop learning and stop talking to people to try and find out if our hypothesis can be disvalidated. We want to validate our hypothesis, but we don't want people to disvalidate it. So because of that, we fail to learn. And that's the main reason why I feel that a lot of entrepreneurs, poor thing, we try so hard, and then we use all our life savings, we lose so many years of our life, and we never get anywhere.
So, because I mean, like, it's very common, like sometimes like you yum cha with your friends, and then you say, hey, I actually got this idea of very good, sure work one. Okay, come on, let's quit our jobs and start this idea, and we will make millions and millions and millions. So yeah, how can they like validate so-called like their products or their services before they even proceed with this big idea?
First things first, right? The first thing they should never assume or say is that my idea will result in making big bucks. Never say that, because the thing about it is that once you believe that it's going to be like that, or you believe that it's going to be a big time thing or whatever, you have in your mind that this this paradigm that, oh, it cannot be anything small, it has to be something big. When actually, before we think about an idea, the first thing we need to do is to study the market. And studying the market is not a research endeavor, no. It's actually something a lot simpler, but it's a lot more extensive as well. What do I mean by that? Very often, right, the entrepreneurs who come out with killer solutions solve the very problem that they face on. So that means, for example, Airbnb, they had a problem looking for a hotel room in some kind of a big event and so on. So they said, why can't, if only people do this, isn't that great? And very often, a lot of these ideas are not high-tech ideas. They're very low-tech, very boring type of businesses. Just as someone found a creative way to solve a problem that everybody seems to be jumping hoops over just to get around it. And before long, they make a lot of traction because a lot of people buy that. So one of the things which an entrepreneur as a practice should do, right, is really try and look around our world in the way we live our life, whether is it from the news, from the internet, or just by the way sometimes we take the bus or we drive or whatever, to try and see what is it in our life that has the most friction. If it takes a lot of friction for us to get to somewhere, to do certain things, that means a lot of other people are facing that as well. And if that can be quantified into a solution that people are prepared to pay for just to get around that, we may be onto something that someone is prepared to pay for. Now, it may not necessarily disrupt things. Couple of years ago, I was asked to give a talk on how do small companies compete with big ones. And I challenged the idea of disruption. Everybody seems to want to disrupt somebody. Everybody always seems to want to make somebody go out of business. It doesn't have to be like that. You can actually help another business and make a lot of money along the way. So we have to think things right now. The core idea behind it is find a problem to solve. Not just think about a solution, but find the problem first. Which means that if we go out and drink coffee with our friends, right, it will not be saying things like, oh, I've got this idea. It will not be like that. It will be, hey, this problem that we all face, do you face that problem? How do you get around that? Hey, what if I do this? Do you think it's something? The whole conversation sounds very different when we go that way.
Okay, and like let's say once they have launched and like crickets, like what you say, like no one buy their things. How can they reiterate or go from there? Like how can they continue on with this journey?
So the first thing is, one of the first things I want to do every time I launch a product or an MVP into the market is I have to do customer surveys. I have to talk to customers. If I can, get them on the phone. If I need to, pay them $5, pay them $10 just to get on the phone, give them a voucher or something like that. So it's to find out, number one, are they using the product? That's the most important telltale sign. No point having someone paying for the product and never use, A lot of people do that. They pay a subscription, they never use one. And then on our books, it sounds damn good. So because we got the subscription revenue coming, but actually the users are not using it. So first thing, let's find out, are they using it? And if they're using it, how are they using it? And then for selected customers who are more willing, get them to our office, watch them use. That's the very important thing. Don't do anything, just watch them use, see where they get frustrated, see what they do, everything and so on. Even if there's crickets, that means crickets, not many people using it, but you still hear crickets, right? Still got people are using it. Get those people who are using it to come to the office, use it, but don't ask them for improvements because customers are not the best people to tell us what to improve on. But customers are the best people to show us where the problems are. Just watch how they use it and have a conversation with them and see if that really solve the problem or not. Most importantly, we need to accept that sometimes the thing that we have designed may not actually solve the problem. So in my book, I use this very famous example. The story of Viagra. We all know the erectile dysfunctional drug that Pfizer made billions out of it. But it wasn't designed to be that function, It was designed as a cardiac drug. It was designed for high blood pressure one. So they patented it initially as a cardio drug. That means for someone with a cardiac disease or high blood pressure and so on. But then when they went on clinical trials, they figured out that, it didn't work in that particular area. It didn't work. Now, the scientists could have just said, we double down on it, we improve on it, and just try and force feed it through that sector. Maybe they did that. But then another group looked at it and said, you know what? There's another side effect. There's this particular side effect. On certain male patients, it resulted in this. Then they went in that direction, and then look at what it became. So sometimes what we set out, the problem we set out to solve may not be like that one. In fact, I would say that most of the time, what we think our solution is designed to solve may not be the case. We have to keep our eyes open and go and find what other areas where this solution seem to be very applicable. And I've got more than enough examples in my life to actually show that. I can tell you 80% of the time when we thought a solution is solving a particular problem, we were barking up the wrong tree. But the few percent when we made a lot of money out of it was when we figure out that, hey, maybe we can use it in another setting to solve another problem using the exact same product. And that's when we hit jackpot. That was how we find working.
And how do you find that, like, another angle from it? Is it because you get customers to your office and then you start seeing how they use your product, then suddenly like a light bulb turns on?
For me, most of the time is I observe on the ground. So when the customers are using it, say for example, if I run a service business, so I observe on the ground how the customer responds to this particular service that I'm running. And then I keep asking, now I have this capability, I have this. Can I do more? Can I do something else for this group of people? Now, what is it that this group of people are really dreaming about? If I can fulfill their dreams, what does that look like? Is it something that I can frame this forward? Which is what I did in my business. I started off an educational services business. I worked out of my own bedroom as a single founder, one guy, one-man show, doing it. I started the business in September, and then by December, I made a little bit of money. I made about 15,000. That's okay, pretty decent for one guy. Then after that, the following year, I made about 80,000, which was okay for one-man show, but I was trying to do just better than what everybody else was doing. So I was not the first guy in the market. There were already players in the market. I saw what they were doing. I wanted to do a better job in the market. And I made about 80,000, and that was okay, Singapore dollars. But the following year, I made 20 times that amount. Now, why is it that within year on year, it just went like that, right? What is it that I did differently? I reflected on my journey. I realized that towards the end of the first year, I looked at the work and I said, you know what? I'm only bringing incremental benefits to the customers. That means I'm competing with everybody else by just trying to be better. Can I use the same knowledge that I have and bring something that no one else has thought of, but they really want one? If I can sell them a compelling vision to do this. This is what I did in my second year, and the revenue just shot way up. Now, not every time this works, but for those few times, it worked very beautifully for me and my team. So the idea behind it is always be very, very observant and always keep reflecting on what we bring to the table. Does it really solve a problem? Can it be better? Can I paint a vision that they cannot reject? So sometimes a product is not about, oh, my product is like that. It has this feature, this feature, this feature. It's not like that. The product is about what it can do to that person. So I quote what Steve Jobs or Apple did when they launched iPod. It's quite simple. They didn't say that, oh, this is a piece of hardware that can do this. They didn't. They just went on to say, it's 1,000 songs in your pocket. Because that's what it could do for you. And that was the vision that they wanted you to have. And once you have that vision, you're bought into that vision, the imagination of the customer will have a life of its own to know what they want to do with your product. That's when magic happens. So most of the time, it's not about taking a product out there to sell, but more so to take a vision, to try and sell a vision to a particular group of customers so that they get bought into it to the extent that they feel that if there's anybody who can do this, it will be you. So whether you are in a service business or you're in a product business or you're in a blended business, it doesn't really quite matter. If we have that kind of vision, you bring forward, it can change a lot of things.
Okay, great. So your book, The Fast Founder, is like the main concept is like to start, scale, and also exit in like 36 months. Yeah. So what are some of the best and worst type of business to run if an entrepreneur wish to exit in 36 months? Okay,
so I start with the worst type of business to run. And I learned this from a very successful entrepreneur in China when I was walking with him on Sihu, Westlake in Hangzhou, and he was my investor, and then we were talking. He told me this, and I remember I totally agree on it. He told me, he said, you know, Eric, there are two kinds of business outcomes that are very good for the entrepreneur one. The first business outcome is you make so much money that you can do a lot of things. Okay, that one we all know lah. You make a lot of money, of course it's a good business outcome, right? So I said, yeah, this one I know. Then he told me, he said, the next business outcome is when you lose so much money, right, that you have no choice but to close the business. Now that surprised me, I asked him, I said, why is that a good business outcome? He said, because then there's clarity. You know exactly what you need to do. The worst outcome for an entrepreneur is the in-between. You don't make enough to fly, you don't lose enough to die. He said this kind of living dead companies are the worst type of business to run. So therefore, when I wrote this book, I told myself, and I've done it before, I've got acquisition offers and I've exited companies before within this time frame. I said 36 months is actually a good time to start an exit. Now, what do I mean by an exit? An exit could be IPO, could be a trade sale, could be a merger, or could be closure, That's also an exit. So, but whatever it is, within 36 months, we have enough time to validate if this is the right thing we want to do. The worst kind of thing that can happen to an entrepreneur is we get into this business, we don't make too much, we don't make too little, then we keep grinding. We keep grinding. Before you know it, 1 year pass, 5 years pass, 10 years pass, 15, 20 years pass. Hey, we don't live that long in our lifetime. So 20 years of our life is a very long period of time. So it passed already. Then we look back and we ask ourselves, what have I achieved? What have I gotten out of this business that I can call my own and I can consider to be successful? And then we realize that actually not that much. And the day I stop working, I don't make money. That's horrible. That's very painful. Don't get into that kind of situation. So that's the kind of worst business that to run. So if you want to jump onto the best type of business that can exit in 36 months, the first criteria is speed of growth. That means the growth must be very fast. Now, what type of business have that? So in my book, I advocate this particular concept called an audaciously desirable offering, or an ADO. Now, what exactly is that? An ADO is one of those offering. An offering can be a product, or it can be a service, or it can be a mix of both. So I use the term offering very, very generally. So an ADO, or an audaciously desirable offering, right, is one of those things which, when we first launch it into the market, no one believed us. Our competitors, right, will look at us and they will laugh at us. They'll say things like, this guy must be crazy. How are they going to make money out of it? Sure die one, no way, not sustainable. They will say things like, nobody will want it. They will say things like that. Then when we launch it to a customer, right, the customer may look at it and say, hey, you sure or not? It's too good to be true, right? How can it be like that? And so there's this kind of dilemma and dichotomy going around it. But once we prove that it works, then suddenly two things will happen. Your customers will come to you without you needing to market, because word will spread like wildfire. The people will come to you and your phone will ring non-stop. And there's a way to make that happen, as I've seen it before in some of the ventures which I used to run. Now then the competitors will copy you like mad. They will start copying you and so on, which is an okay thing. Because an ADO is not supposed to be the only product that you do or the only offering you do. You go on and find the next ADO and then you scale. That's what Apple does. That's what very successful companies actually do. So the best type of business are the businesses that have ADOs or are very, very conscious of wanting to go out there and develop ADOs to actually solve that kind of problems. And in my book, I actually spend quite a bit of time to describe what ADOs do, what they can do for the customer, and what are the kind of behavior they typically elicit in customers and in other stakeholders around us. But if they have that, then they'll be very poised for rapid growth. So we see some of the companies that we know very well, like even in China, like Taobao is one of them. Used to be Facebook as well. And then Airbnb used to be that as well. You see that they all have a similar pattern in that. Yeah.
It's like basically when they start, people is like doubtful whether can it work or not. So for example, like Airbnb, can I share bed with a stranger? Or Uber, can I share rides with a stranger? That kind of thing.
That's right.
But like you say, when it does work, then you really spread like wildfire. Yeah. Everyone will tell their friends, and people will download the app, and things will go well.
Yeah, I remember one of those cab ride that I took in Singapore, and we were talking about Taobao, and that particular driver, he's not Chinese, and he was telling me, he said, oh, Taobao, oh, my wife also used a little bit. Now, Taobao is interesting because Taobao is one of those products which, if you don't know Chinese, it's very hard to navigate. So when you're talking to a non-Chinese who tells you that he's using Taobao, that's something, So I told him this joke. I said, you know what, in Taobao, right, I buy a pair of shoes for price cheaper than a Grab ride that I'm paying you right now. I said, when you have that kind of paradigm, sometimes, and you take 2-3 Grab rides a day, right? I essentially can buy 2-3 pairs of shoes a day from Taobao. He said, wow, when you look at it that way, totally very different. Wow, now I must go back and tell my wife about Taobao also what you can do. See, like that, customers tell to customers, user tell user how it goes. The thing spread, no? That's how when a product is, when an offering is an audaciously desirable one, it has a kind of effect on people.
Yes, something novel, something interesting that people have not tried before. Then, if it really works, then they'll tell their friends, and it will spread like wildfire.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very interesting. It doesn't have to be mind blowing. It doesn't have to be mind blowing one. It just have to solve a problem so elegantly, right? People just cannot live without it. Yeah, and there are. If we think hard enough, we will always find so many problems in our life that need solving. We just have to spend some time to go and figure out.
Okay. Great. So can they go through this 36 months solo, or do they need like a co-founder?
Okay, so I started my first venture, or rather my second venture, as a solo co-founder. But I don't advise that people do that. I always say that try and assemble a team. Why? Because if you only have 36 months to make or break something, you need to be able to do 5 things very, very well. We need to be able to design, we need to be able to grow, to build, to sell, and to operate. All 5 things we need to do very, very well. So when we talk about design, right, usually a designer is the visionary, the person who can stand on stage and then talk and say that, wow, the world is like that, this is how we're going to solve the problem. The Steve Jobs who can stand on stage and talk and can convince everybody on. So the visionary, that's a designer. But visionary without a mapper, who is the person who is growing the company cannot grow on it. So what does a grower do? A grower maps the growth path of the company. Oh, the company is going to achieve this milestone, that milestone. Then after we're going to look for this funding from this, like that. Then we'll exit at this point. That is a corporate development role. That usually may not actually be a CEO role. So the corporate developer or the CFO thinks through all that. Then you need an architect, somebody who can build the product, whether or not to source from things from different places, assemble them, or whatever, or program it, or get a bunch of programmers to do it. A builder needs to get that happen. Then, of course, you need somebody who can sell it. Now, finally, you need somebody who can orchestrate it. I call that the operator. So when you need to put everything together, you need to orchestrate it. So in Apple's case, right, the orchestrator was Tim Cook for the longest time. He could put all these things together. Now, what's the likelihood that one guy or one girl can do all that? It is possible, depending on how simple the business is, but usually not for long, even though it's possible. So for me, after the first year, wow, I got to recruit already, because I realized I cannot. The expertise portfolio has diversified so much that I really need to bring different people to hold different parts of the fort. So I tell founders who really want to go at it alone, try and find a team of people who can work with you. Now, the important thing about it is, don't find your best friends, because you may lose your friend.
Most of the time, you will lose your friends.
Most of the time, if you look at 90% startups fail, right, means 90% your friendship will die. So don't find your best friend. Find somebody with complementary skills and you can work with. And that's very important. That means complementary skills and complementary personality that you can work with. So do it like the way producers do for boy band and girl band. So when they set up boy band and pop bands, what they do is that the band members may not know each other one. Then they bring them together, they let them get to know each other, their complementary skills, they can work with each other, personality, then they gel them together. I would tell the founder to go and find people like that and venture build your way out of it. It's a lot safer, a bet.
So from your own journey, how did you find your team, assemble your team, or even find a co-founder in your next other ventures?
Yeah, so in my next other ventures, right, I normally find co-founder because, okay, my role is I'm good at designing, I'm good at growing, so I'm a corporate development guy, but I'm not good at building. So I'm not necessarily good at selling. So what do I do is that I go and find the builders. So if I want to build a particular SaaS product, I'll go and find a group of people that I can partner with and go and strike a deal with them, either as my co-founder or as my collaborators. So I will go and come up with different kind of deals to make that happen. Then once I need to sell, right, I have another group of people who will then work with me. Either they take a stake in my business where they have channels to many different places, and then that's when we split it. Now the important thing is this. Sometimes when we have no resources, right, we have to learn how to share. And as entrepreneurs, right, we don't know how to share enough. We must learn how to share. Always remember, this is not our first, nor is it going to be our last business. If we think of it that way, right, we are not afraid to share with many different people who can make things work together. Now, once we have that things in place, right, that's when things will start to grow. And when we learn how to share, the whole mechanics become very different. And you'll find that people can be a lot more tolerant with each other, and people will be a lot more cordial and can work a lot better with one another. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think very interesting, the one they mentioned about sharing. It's like sometimes it's like entrepreneurs want to hold on to the equity very, very tight and refuse to like let go. That's why the business cannot scale far also when this happens.
That's right.
Okay. So before starting the business, how can the entrepreneur assess like the size of the market and so like the potential opportunities or the TAM?
So there's of course the very theoretical way of assessing TAM, which is, you go and look at some Gartner report and so on. And some experts will look at it and say, there's a lazy way to assess a TAM. Or some people say, let's do ground up to go and assess a TAM, a SAM or a SOM to do something like that. I usually find looking at TAM, SAM or SOM is most relevant when we are doing fundraising. Why? Because you're talking to investors who really do not know this domain. They have no idea what is it. You got to convince them, the market is actually so big. So it's actually more to convince an investor than to tell the entrepreneur that this problem is real. I mean, to be quite honest, I don't think Facebook, when they first started, right, are able to tell you what their TAM is. So I wouldn't be so fixated on getting the TAM right. I'll be more fixated in solving a real problem that people want solved, and then start bringing in revenue to prove that this is a problem so worthy that people are prepared to pay you for it. Then when you're going to look for investment, how you assess this TAM is you find the same problem. Is it a worldwide problem? Is it just restricted to Southeast Asia? Is it Southeast Asia? Then we quantify what that is and we work downwards from there. Of course, if you want to be a unicorn, then your TAM must be at least 1 billion USD. Anything less than that, big funds won't bother. How many companies have actually become unicorn in 36 months? I don't know many. They can do that. But is being a unicorn important? Or is being able to solve a problem systemically to the point that will make the startup successful to the point of an exit important? What is more important? So when we look at it from that particular angle, I wouldn't leverage so much on saying that, let's get the TAM right, than to let's get the problem right. Very often, we find a problem that doesn't exist to solve, or we find a problem which everybody don't think too highly about, and we think that our solution, therefore, is going to make a lot of money because no one really thinks that problem is worth it. So I will really try and focus on something a bit more pragmatic.
Okay, so speaking of raising funds for entrepreneurs who wish to raise funds like for the first time, could you share like how's the process like, and should they even like raise funds to begin with?
So the process, right, typically is like that, depending on which stage you are in. So assuming that you're raising it for the first time, so it's pre-seed. So you're doing it at pre-seed, or maybe you're lucky, maybe seed, that needs to go a bit of traction already. So usually it goes like this. You have a pitch deck, usually it's about 6 to 8 slides, no more than that, and very little words, lots and lots of graphics, very infographic, like, so if people look at it, people get the idea, they like it, they buy. You send it out, you get some people to get to the investors. If they like it, you get to meet them, you pitch. That's when you pitch, you must have the deck properly done up, your story must be very well thought through. If they like it enough, they will request for a second meeting. And this time, the second meeting, they will come to your office, they want to look at your staff, they want to look at how you manage your staff. If you have regional office, they may fly there to look at it. This is what we call an informal commercial due diligence, trying to assess if really is this market real and so on. Now, some investors may say that, you know what, I got portfolio companies in my portfolio, I would like you to work with them first. And I will help you with your business first by referring people to you. Actually, the intent is I want to see whether or not your thing is really that kick-ass or whether is it that invest-worthy. So I'm going to send a company to work with you to see how that works. Now, if assuming that that's all is great, the investor will come back and start negotiating. Okay, so how much money do you want? How much shares you want? And assuming that both parties agree on a certain share structure, then a term sheet will come. So a term sheet is in the form of like a non-binding document that says that, oh, these are the terms when I come in, these are the reserve matters that I want, this is how much I want shares and how many percent and so on. And you sign on it. Now, the funny thing about it is a lot of entrepreneurs actually celebrate at this stage and say, wow, I got term sheet, very happy. Actually, term sheet
got
is
money already.
Nothing. Term sheet is nothing one. It's a non-binding agreement of somebody who say, I want to chop a place now, so you don't talk to anybody first, because what follows next can be very painful depending on how old the company is. So what follows next is the investor will commence legal due diligence and financial due diligence, what we call LDD and FDD. Now, depending on how big is your business, or how many contracts that you have, or how big is your operation, or how long you have been in the business, that process can be short, as in 1 month, 1.5 months, and they will settle it, or it can be long, 9 months. I know of companies 2 years already, still haven't closed the FDD. So all this while you have a term sheet hanging there, but you got no money, and all this while you're still running the company without additional cash. And they will be watching you in that particular process. Now, assuming that you've gone through the due diligence, everything is okay, then you will get a subscription agreement from the investor. Now, this time around, they state very clearly what are the things that you have to warrant, you have to guarantee, you have to make representation of. It's a pretty thick document. And then what are the conditions you need to meet before or shortly after they send you the money. And usually, the founder have to read that very carefully. So once you sign on it, okay, the money comes to you, but you got to fulfill those conditions within a certain period of time. Now, if you don't, then the investor may claw back the money, or the investor may give you a bit of money and so on. So if you look at it from this particular process, right, some entrepreneurs may look at it and say, so tedious, ayo, I rather not fundraise. That's right. If you can, don't. So one of the things that Jack Ma always said, right, Jack Ma said before, famous thing is that, he said, you only raise funds when you don't need to. You don't raise funds when you need to raise. Because when you need to raise, you're desperate. Then you cannot negotiate. You're afraid. Your runway is running out. You got no money. So those are all the telltale signs that actually doesn't bode well for the company. And to an investor, if the investor sees a strategic value in your business, then the investors will use that telltale sign to press down your price. Because they're desperate. If the investor does not see a strategic value in your business and see a purely financial value, then those telltale signs will make the investor scared and pull back a little bit. So either way is not good. But a lot of entrepreneurs I included, we tend to raise funds when we need to raise. That's not the right thing. Because when you raise funds when you don't need to raise it, right, you can walk away from a term that is not good. So if an investor give you horrible terms, right, walk away . You tell them, never mind I'll just continue my own thing. That is the way to do it. So my advice to entrepreneurs, and I remind myself that constantly too, is that really spend resources, spend time, spend your network, build the business first. Build it up first. Don't think about wanting to raise money. Think about really solving a problem, making it fundamentally sound first. Then some people will come and tell me, but without money, how am I going to scale the business? Don't scale first. Make money first. That's the most important thing. We have to prove to people that we can make money. Then we can convince people to put money to make more. That's how it works. Because investors don't invest money to help us survive. Investors invest money to help us grow. And if we are not already growing, right, we have no case for raising money. So that's the paradigm which has to be there. We have to get that right. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say we move to the route of not raising money. So how can entrepreneurs reach customers quickly, or what are some marketing strategies that they can do with minimal funding or cash?
Right. So I know of a few partners that are in my ecosystem that are super solid digital marketing or martech companies. So for example, there's one particular partner I know. He has about 5 million influencers and micro influencers, KOLs and KOCs in his database. It's so big, and it really covers many different sectors. So I remember when I first launched my book, right? He came to me. He said, "You know what? Hey, let's get the book to be a bestsellers list on Amazon SG lah. I'll get my influencers to push for you. All you need to do is when they sell whatever, you just give them a cut and whatever. So it's not money upfront, you know. It's not money upfront, and they will they'll take a cut of revenue that's coming in. Okay, give people more lah, because you want to achieve certain kind of outcomes in that. I was fortunate because before we did that, it hit the bestsellers list on Amazon SG. So I don't need that lah. But what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of these kind of companies out there that think like venture builders, and these are professional market-facing companies. So they may have platforms that already have a lot of customers. They have KOLs, KOCs, and these days, it's not just about ads. It's not just about SEOs. It's about social e-commerce, where you need to get a group of people where they have like a few hundred to about 1,000 to 2,000 people in their Telegram channels, but everybody seems to know him or her, and when he or she says they're going to use something, they all believe because they all have a shared belief. This kind of selling, typically for B2C, simple to understand business, is what may do well without actually hefty advertisements. So I would encourage the founder to go and find companies, and there are a lot of such people around, and strike deals with them. Again, I say, don't be afraid to share. Doesn't matter if you earn very little at the beginning, because what you want is people to use the offering, use the product, love it, then they will tell their friends about it, and before you know it, you don't need to do heavy marketing before they come in. So that's one method. Find such people to do it. Secondly, always try to get onto the news as often as we can. News, news, not social journalism. It's not something that people put on TikTok. That kind of, no, not that. Mainframe news. So a lot of people say, wow, but mainframe news is dead. Yes, to a certain extent, if you compare with TikTok and every other thing and Douyin and all that, it may be true. But mainframe news has a certain value still in the eyes of the reader, because they're still considered as credible journalism, where people look at it, someone feature it, and so on. So if you can get your product or your offering on the news as often as you can and as often as possible, mind share and top of mind get quickly developed around the domain where you are in. So I'll give you this example. One of the reasons why my first venture could just spring 20 times up in terms of revenue was at the end of the first year, I fit it into my business plan to be in the news or in the mainframe newspapers at least once every 2 months. That was my business plan. So I wanted to make sure that everything I do right is newsy enough, is innovative enough, is inspiring enough, to the point that reporters will come and cover one for this. And we did that. Every 2 months, one newspaper or one news article or whatever, some news channel will cover. So before you know it, everybody associate you with this particular domain. No? You talk about this domain, it's always this company, we go and look for them. So we are very sticky in that particular domain. And that's possible, and that's free. And then people ask me, did you get a PR company to do this? Well, my PR machinery was 1.5 people. One intern plus half of my time. And so what was the paradigm that we had during that time when we were doing it? The very same paradigm that Amazon right now still practice, which is before you launch a new product, the product engineer or the product champion must first draft a press release. And the press release must consider who is it impacting, what will that person impacting will say about this product, and then I must write all that, no? Then it goes all the way up to top management, right? Who will then review it and decide whether or not to throw it back down and say this is not compelling enough, rewrite and see what, or kill the project, or fund the project. So everything begins with a press release. So if we think like that, basically we are angling our offering to benefit the client in an inspiring way that people want to talk about it on the mainstream papers. And that's free. This is really free. And it's not just advertising anymore, really. It's credibility building. So there are many angles to make that happen. Sometimes you talk about certain feature, you talk about the impact it has on people. Sometimes you have certain results you want to show. So all these things we have to think through for that. And if you put that all together, actually marketing budget doesn't have to be that high. Then a lot of people will say that, then how? Digital marketing companies will die. Actually, it's no one. I would invite digital marketing companies to rethink their business model as well. Because what do all companies want? They want recurring revenue, right? They all want recurring revenue. So either you get a retainer, in which case currently you are a cost to everybody, or you get a share of everybody else's earnings, in which case you may get recurring revenue without doing a lot, because you're just opening up your channel, you're helping them to funnel and so on. It's a slight thinking away from the typical charging model that we are very used to when we are charging a service.
Yeah. So for the news one, how do you get like the context of do you like one by one approach the journalists, or they will come to you once they see your offer?
So first things first, we must draft press release, and you must draft it very compellingly, and then you need to send it to the respective journal. If you know journalists, that would be great. If you don't, and you have a small little budget, get to know some of those PR companies that are formed by former journalists. So the former journalists that come out and start PR company, there are a lot of them do that. So you go and look for them, you have this relationship, they ask, cut the deal with them so that they can help you angle your story very well. And then try to be on as many platforms as possible. Be a thought leader. So be active on LinkedIn, be active on platforms where you get to talk, share, and talk about your own things. Then from there, people will start to take notice of what we do. So a journalist can be a mainframe newspaper journalist, or it can be a podcast like this. What you're doing now, you reach out to a lot of people will watch it, people read it, people respond to it. So this kind of attention are all very important, because what exactly, for example, Ben, what exactly are you doing right now? You're hoping to ask a thought leader in a certain particular domain about his or her thoughts on certain things.
Yep.
So there is credibility accorded to the person who's being interviewed in that. Very similar to how a mainframe newspaper or mainframe news channel is doing it. So this is how I'll do it.
Okay, great ideas. So, and most importantly, I think that is minimal budget as compared to like the current marketing strategies, like, put a lot of money on Google ads, on Facebook ads, or on billboard. Those are like cost a lot of money. Whereas these are like strategies that are relatively free or low cost to get started.
Yes.
Okay, so we are coming towards the end of the show. So what are the options for an entrepreneur to exit after 36 months? Like, should they continue running the business longer and potentially selling at a higher price? So what are like some things to consider at the end of the 3 years?
So the normal way when we talk about options to exit, what are the different pathways to exit? There are a few. The first one is a trade sale. You're trying to build a company to the point that someone, a strategic buyer, will come and buy you out. Okay. And then pay you either cash or stock or whatever. And it really depends on whether or not the company is a public company or a private company. You need to negotiate and think very carefully. I put quite a fair bit of thoughts on that in my book as well. So if the reader is interested, you can go and check it out. The other area is, of course, IPO. Some people look at it and say, hey, 3-year-old company, how to IPO? Yes, it is possible. I mean, if you can get your revenue boosted up to a certain extent, you can even get IPO on Nasdaq third board. It is possible. So don't rule out the possibility of going public. But going public is not an end. Going public is often just the beginning for the founder, because you cannot exit within the first year. You've got to continue to build your business, you've got to continue to grind, you've got to push it up even further. But it is an exit eventually for you, because the door is already open for you in that already. The third is, of course, an M&A, where you want to go and merge with another company, and then you swap your shares inside, or you get part cash, part shares in that, similar to the first one, but then you have to identify your targets very carefully in that. The fourth way to exit, close up. So that means you look at the company and say, really cannot, no point. So let's close it. Now, when do we hold and when do we let go? Actually, there's no hard and fast rule to that. Different people have different ambitions, different people have different thinking in that. But if you ask me to think based on my experience so far, my advice to first-time founders is, I would rather you, as a first-time founder, exit once, even though not at a crazy $1 billion exit. It could be $1 million, it could be a $5 million, or if you're lucky, $20 million exit. That's really very good. Yeah. If you can exit, or maybe a few $100,000 exit, doesn't matter. Exit it once, so as to tell people and to tell yourself that you have gone through the whole thing from start to finish, one round. Because you are an entrepreneur, it will not be your last problem to solve. You will find the next problem and you will need investment, right? So if you have exited, you will have cash. So I always say cash in hand is cash indeed. Cash in stock is not cash indeed. It's not money because the stock can crash. So cash in hand is cash indeed. So hold on to the cash. So the next business that you want, you will be the first investor. You put in a bit of your own money into it. Then when you want to raise money, you can tell the investor that, you know what, my previous venture, I went from startup to exit. You know what, I did it really fast in that. So the investor will look at you, oh, okay, this person is good. So risk is a lot lower. Therefore, I will believe you. What more? You put in some money yourself too. What, very good. You check all the boxes. So it's a lot easier to raise money that way. Then go for a bigger exit. Then after that, go for a bigger exit. Go for a bigger exit. So this is the paradigm which I would advocate to the founder. But of course, not everybody agrees with this. Some people look at it and say, no lah, I think mine is worth $1 billion. Okay lah, then you go on, you do it. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Now, if you do, that's great. What if you don't? What if you don't? Then what do you call? Somebody who started a business that crashed? Or would you rather be somebody who started a business, small one, but exited, so understood how to go around solving it? I choose the latter lah, where I can start and exit and I look very good to the next investor who is going to come to solve my next problem. And I know how to get around to make that happen. So that's how I advocate now.
Because typically I feel like if you are a true breed entrepreneur, you will not be just satisfied solving just one problem.
Yeah.
You want to solve many problems. So there's there's many things to do. So maybe just like what you said, exit one business first and build up like your own credibility, and then you can go from there.
There's the other thing that we need to consider also is the geography where we operate. So for example, we are in Southeast Asia, right? Our economy is not big. Even if you are in Indonesia, you say, oh, we are the biggest economy. Yeah, by numbers, yes.
Yep.
But in terms of by dollar terms, you're still not very big because the affordability is not big and everything is not there. So we're not that big. So our accessible market is not huge to begin with. Now, what's the likelihood that a unicorn or hundreds of unicorns can come out of this kind of markets without us going to China or Japan or the US to actually make that happen? If we can accept that, then we can accept a slightly lower expectation and therefore a quicker time to exit in that. So we have to manage that, contextualize to where we are.
Okay. So before we end, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, after I kind of exited my company, I made it a point to try and work with entrepreneurs. So I started this practice called Recast Ventures. Why Recast? Because I specifically want to look at boring businesses and also entrepreneurs who are slightly tired. So it's interesting. A lot of people say, why you want to look for entrepreneurs who are tired? I say entrepreneurs who are tired doesn't mean entrepreneurs who are no longer determined, They are still determined. They still want to succeed. But they look at their world right now and they say that for the past 5 years they've been doing this, nothing seems to have improved. What can they do differently? So they are a little bit tired and they are very open to listen to new ideas and listen to new ways of doing businesses. I like to talk to entrepreneurs like that. So why I call it recast is because sometimes you just need to cast the net out. As a fisherman, you need to cast your net out for the second time in a different place at a different time of the day, and you may catch a totally different breed of fish. So sometimes we need to do that. And my role is to work with these entrepreneurs. Hopefully I can inspire them, help them to think differently, and work with them through this journey to help them exit at least once in their life. So that they look at it and they say, I want to do the next thing by myself and so on. So this is what I do in Recast Ventures. And of course, I kind of codify that into this book called the Fast Founder, which is found in Amazon, it's found in MPH, it's found in Kinokuniya, and a few other major bookstores.
Yeah. I mean, for Malaysians, you can get it in MPH. Very, very convenient. I haven't got mine in MPH also. So thanks.
Thank you.
So thanks, Eric, for coming onto the show. Check out the Fast Founder book down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody.